Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second session of the morning workshop. Um, we have scheduled a panel consisting of representatives from five different U.S. agencies. I will be one of the moderators. Chairan Baru is co-moderator. Seems like he's. um, Chairan, I am seeing you as a speaker, so you should be able to unmute yourself and speak. Um, but we have representatives from five agencies here. This will be the order that we'll be going through. So we'll start with Ryan. Ryan, please go ahead and share your screen and introduce yourself and talk about what the NOAA's interest in an open knowledge network is.
Sure. Just 1 second. And while I'm doing that, as an introduction, my name is Ryan Berkheimer. I work at the National Centers for Environmental Information for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And we're doing a lot of activities in the knowledge graph space now as NOAA moves to the cloud holistically. And this presentation relates to that. It was recently given at CEOS, which is a Committee on Earth Observation Satellites at WIGIS 55. So one of the things we're moving to is something called the Geoverse. And this is defined by the United Nations Geospatial Committee of Geospatial Experts. Essentially, we recognize that spatial data infrastructures as they currently exist and as the United Nations has characterized them no longer satisfies the future global interconnected network that we'd like to see. So we're driving a solution here in Web 3.0 standards, full definition of process provenance for scientific trust and reproducibility, et cetera, et cetera. Part of that is this open knowledge network. A lot of the requirements in the solicitation match exactly with this. Essentially, what we're trying to do is enable climbing this, the traditional DIKW pyramid. And right now we're moving from this current situation at NOAA where we have all of these data stovepipes to this target future where everything is globally interconnected, machine-to-machine communication, ultimately for the benefit of multiple users and communities, and we want to meet users where they want to be met, right, by eliminating these data silos. And we're using this global infrastructure framework to do that. So the Geoverse lays out this leveling framework in terms of where we are now and how we're going to get there. The Open Knowledge Network that NSF is running right now is helping to prove that, and people that answer the solicitation hopefully for us will help do that, whether it's for NOAA or across other agencies. Essentially what we want to do is enable through all these different interoperabilities the ability to create something called the Digital Twin Earth. And specifically with the OKN, we're really looking at semantic interoperability. And because of that, NOAA's concern right now is or one of our concerns is in remapping a lot of our existing ways of publishing data into an RDF standard. So we're specifically very interested in theme 1 of the OKN, which is climate resilience and blue economy knowledge graphs that we can connect then with this global system. And I think that's enough context, so I'll leave it at that for questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan. Chayden, would it be okay if we hold on to the questions until the end, after all the panels have a chance to talk, or you want to take questions now? We are not able to hear you, Chayden. Okay. We'll move on. Lauren, you're up next. We have Lauren Sanders from NASA Ames next.
Thank you, Jamin. Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Sanders. I am the acting project scientist for NASA Gene Lab in the Biological and Physical Sciences Division. And I'm going to be talking about the use case that we've provided for the theme 1 of the Proto-OKN solicitation. So a little bit of overview, first of all, in terms of the focus of our work. So Gene Lab is a open, publicly available data repository for spaceflight and space-relevant biological experiments that have been conducted either on Earth, on analog situations and environments, or in space, so being flown on the ISS or on CubeSats. So what we're very interested in is understanding the biological and health impacts of spaceflight. So I'm sure many of us have heard about increased radiation, exposure to hostile enclosed environments, confinement, distance from Earth, et cetera. These are all the main risks that we face, both for humans traveling in space, but also in terms of plant health and animal health. These hazards all lead to specific risks and health consequences. So I've put a couple of those here on the slide. In particular, the space biology program at NASA studies these spaceflight-induced biological changes by studying model organisms. So Gene Lab contains a lot of experimental data from, for example, rodent model organisms, from cell culture, cellular models, studying developmental biology, microbiology, and also a lot of plant data sets. Now, recently, Gene Lab, which is here in the middle, Gene Lab hosts all of the molecular or omics data, so high throughput sequencing data sets. Gene Lab recently combined, merged with other data repositories at NASA, so ALSDA, the Ames Life Sciences Data Archive, which houses physiological, phenotypic, and all the non-omics data, imaging, video, code, and also NBISC, which is a biospecimen repository. So all of these data sets, data repositories came together so that their data sets can be interoperable, because a lot of the data sets have samples that overlap between the different data sets. So these data repositories merged to form the NASA Open Science Data Repository late last year. So this data repository is a database for all spaceflight and space-relevant life sciences data, whether it's omics, whether it's imaging, or whether it's a biospecimen that can be requested for further experimentation. This is an open repository with maximally open access, and the data is fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. We also are implementing necessary controls for any sensitive data, but the majority of our data are completely open and public and ready to use. So for our use case, what we're particularly interested in is being able to create a knowledge graph that integrates the space biology side of the data with the larger biomedical and biological scientific community databases, knowledge graphs, ontologies, because a lot of the phenotypes that we see in spaceflight are very relevant to conditions that we see here on Earth. So being able to create that crosstalk is really important for increased knowledge gain. So with that in mind, in terms of building the knowledge graph for this use case, some of the things that we've been thinking about are that our OSDR database is it's a FAIR database, so it is open and ready to use, but there are a few steps that may need to be taken to make it maximally knowledge graph ready and interoperable. The good news is that OSDR is based on the ISA curation framework, so it is already graph-based. So some of that work has already been done. Other things to keep in mind are identifying appropriate ontologies, performing the necessary harmonization, and then what are the existing biological or biomedical knowledge graphs or databases that would be appropriate and relevant here, keeping in mind human, rodent, plant, all the different types of larger biological data that would be relevant for a space biology integrated knowledge graph. And then in terms of downstream use cases applications, once this node of the knowledge graph has been built, we envision using it or making it available to the biological community to use it for research studies that, as I was talking about, connect space biology features with these relevant Earth biological or biomedical outcomes that we already have studied through medical research here on Earth. Integration of published text for semantic exploration and NLP. And then further down the road, integration of future and upcoming databases and ontologies as those continue to develop. So we'd love to speak with you more about this use case. I've put the points of contact here and there also in the solicitation, myself and Samuel Gebre, who is the Deputy Project Manager for GeneLab. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren. Up next is Dr. Liz Grove from NIJ, National Institute of Justice.
Hi. While I'm dealing with my PowerPoint slide here a minute, yes, I'm Elizabeth Groff. I'm working in, and I go by Liz, so Gemin, don't worry. I'm a senior advisor at the National Institute of Justice. The National Institute of Justice is the research arm of the Department of Justice. And I'm focusing on, in this presentation, just the use cases that we are partnering with NSF on, because we don't have other activities going on right now. So there are 3 criminal justice related use cases in the solicitation. I'm going to talk about each one in turn here. My role is the main contact for these use cases, so that please contact me first and I will make sure you get to the right person who can work with you on any potential applications. So the first one I want to discuss is tracking non-fatal firearms injuries. We are looking to develop a single database that captures non-fatal, interpersonal, and intentional firearm injuries. This database then will serve as a basis for additional research to be done on these types of incidents, so that we can develop and test programs, and then also eventually develop evidence-based policy. Right now, a hodgepodge of databases exist at the federal, state, and local level. For example, the National Incident-Based Reporting System, NIBRS, is out there with some information. State level public health agencies have information. Local level health and law enforcement agencies have data. So we're looking to link all these together and offer a single source solution. Oh, and we also want to emphasize linking to existing databases that might describe the context in which these incidents are occurring. Now, I wanted to put a couple of potential questions up there where we're headed with this database. For example, do non-fatal firearms injuries follow a spatial or temporal pattern? What are the differences in patterns and predictors between fatal and non-fatal firearms injuries? There is significant additional information that's available on the NIJ website, and I hope you'll take a look at that. The second use case is entitled Mining Criminal Justice Insights from Existing Data. This use case involves drawing from the National Archive of Criminal Justice Data, which contains curated data from over 3,200 studies. And the important word there is curated. So these data sets have a lot of metadata available to use them. The archive also includes official statistical data sets collected by the Bureau of Justice Statistics. So the goal here is to link different data sets within the National Archive, but also data sets from outside the archive to archive data. And our hope in asking for this use case was that we'd be able to support the kinds of cross-cutting questions that are very difficult to answer within a single study and promote general knowledge development. Like the first use case, there's a great deal of supplemental information available on NIJ's website about this use case. But I did want to give you one simple example of what is possible. You could ask a question like, how does the violent crime rate change in relation to the amount of funding that's provided for hiring and training of law enforcement personnel? So in that case, you'd be taking the NIBRS data that's in the NACJD and linking it with census information about employment, such as the annual survey of local and government, state and local government finances, or the annual survey of public employment and payroll. The final use case is one that was part of the OKN Innovation Sprint. So there's additional information about this use case on NSF's website. BJS is the primary agency for this use case, and it focuses on efforts that promote community health and well-being more generally. And since many aspects of criminal justice impact community well-being, that's how BJS became involved. So thank you, and I look forward to any questions that you might have about these use cases.
Thank you. Moving on, our next speaker is Haluk Risat from National Institute of Health.
Hi, I am Haluk Risat. I'm representing the National Institute of Health. NIH participation at the Proto Open Knowledge Network initiative is coordinated by the NIH Office of Data Science and Strategy Office. NIH is mainly interested in the Team 2, the fabric part. As you know, NIH has many knowledge database and knowledge graph related projects and programs in existence. Those programs have been generating lots of knowledge and data sets for that. And NIH is mainly interested how we can link those data graphs, the knowledge graphs and database to each other. And then in other words, we are interested in the development of new and novel methods for linking data resources to each other. In other words, forming a fabric among them. If you have any questions about NIH interest in this, my contact information is provided in the program announcement. Please feel free to reach out to me. Thanks.
Thank you. Hello. Our last panel member is Dalia Varanga from USGS. Dalia.
Sorry, I had practiced. Now it's not really. Can you?
Do you have a PDF to share?
Not a PDF. I have a PowerPoint. Oh well, no problem. The USGS serves the National Topographic Mapping Program, geospatial data and maps for in 45 different data layers with 8 general domain themes. We also enable customized mapping through a user interface. We have experience at interagency collaboration, both through what would be a use case model and what would be a data fabric model. Our data fabric is that we are the providers for the National Geographic Data Committee elevation, hydrography, orthoimagery, and geographic names. Our use case practices are primarily with the Department of Interior, for example, with National Digital Trails and wildland fire management. Our priorities are to serve, so within both of these tracks, our priorities are to serve a broad range of users through app-based interfaces, connecting our data with sources such as GeoLink data or OpenStreetMap through attribute matching, enable smart data access using public government data services, and Sparkle endpoints for local user clients. We want to minimize work and data duplication, maintain graphically sensitive geospatial relations. We are probably the best source for trusted geospatial processing in the nation. We create logically consistent knowledge representations, developing query shapes and other semantic approaches, and build input through collaborative approaches. Our virtual knowledge graph systems have, to now, been very expensive extract, load, and transform steps that must be repeated anytime data or schema changes. The virtual knowledge graph systems we aim to create take advantage of existing tools but perform the transform at query time. So data only needs to be updated when the data itself changes, the instantiation changes, and the ontology can be changed near real time in the middleware virtual component. Spatial is special. There's a lot of processing that has to be done that is consistent with spatial data science, but we want to turn to new developments in topology and attributes as properties to more intuitively produce knowledge and communicate with users. We are a supporter of the GeoSparkle standard, not only for queries, but also for spatial reasoning. And other improvements to consider are that one of our most high priorities is the publication of elevation data, which is available as national elevation data models or as point cloud formats from LiDAR and IFSAR. Collaborative approaches through technology policy to link among programs. That's it.
Thank you, Dahlia. At this point, we'll be taking questions. So if any of the attendees have questions, please raise your hand. The facilitator will be able to spotlight you and then allow you to turn on your microphone and ask your questions. Or you could post your questions in the chat.
You can change the screen.
I'm not seeing any questions from the audience at the
Thank you.
point. Well, I'll start off with a question for the panelist.
Can you hear me, Kevin?
Yes, we could hear you.
No, you can't hear me?
We could hear you.
Okay, I can't hear you. Oh, you can hear me?
We could hear you, Chaitan, but very faintly. We'll go to Craig. Craig, do you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question for Dahlia. So you mentioned all the interesting data sets that USGS has, and I'm wondering if there's specific areas in particular, specific use cases that would be particularly relevant that you see, applying knowledge graphs to address. Because I know that you have just a tremendous amount of data, a tremendous number of applications for all that kind of data. I'm wondering if there's particular areas or use cases that you have in mind that would be particularly useful.
I can't think of any specific use cases. I apologize for the echo. Is that my problem?
No, it's me.
Okay, sorry. Our use cases are usually mandated through the Department of Interior. So although we publish data for the public, we don't typically get involved in public use cases. We'd love to. I mean, that's what the national map is. It's used by industry, national associations, local, state, federal government, and tribal governments for their purposes. And we want to facilitate that and make that better and easier. But, like I said, we're kind of split between track 1 and 2.
Yeah, and I didn't necessarily mean public use cases. I mean even use cases that were particularly valuable for USGS for your own internal projects and mission. Okay.
I'm not seeing any raised hands. But I'll ask a question to the panelists. Each of you talked about various use cases relevant to your agency, but the concept of open knowledge network is interconnecting these various knowledge graphs. Can you talk about a little bit about your thoughts on what would that enable, interconnecting these various knowledge graphs that you address your own, that would empower your own data, would provide in kind of a new capability to the user?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. So the way we're thinking about it is, we're enabling all of our data at NOAA in this open knowledge way, and we know that we won't have all the data that we would want, say, and to run a process to enable decision making. So as an example, say the Federal Reserve has a lot of hurricane data and economic data that we might not have access to. What we would like to do is prepare, a process described plan, essentially, pass that information, that process request to somebody like the Federal Reserve, so they can, fulfill this request, pass us back the information, so we can store it as a result alongside our data that went into the process request, and so then we have full provenance. What we really care about is enabling, full provenance, and as part of that, we're going to, we know we're going to need to be interoperating with a lot of different agencies, holding a lot of different, data in this way. But we want to be able to, interoperate in that way, and we want to enable specialization. So our approach kind of relies on other people coming up to speed on this approach, and then also posting their data in this open way, if that helps.
Thank you. Anyone else want to respond to that?
Sure, I can jump in also. Great question, Jimin. So the way that we've been approaching this is sort of from a scientific perspective. Space biology is a specific domain of biology, so how can we expand out to the larger biological domain? But even beyond that, we can take this one step further and say, how can we connect multiple different scientific domains specifically, and then we can think about going even outside of science. But I think, that next step would be looking at the other scientific use cases that are maybe farther outside of biology, but maybe share some of the same terminology or outcomes. Or we often have, for example, environmental data, which are factors in our biological experiments. We need to know about the environmental variability in different places on the International Space Station, for example. And so having that data and understanding the interplay between those different factors is really important in biology. So I would say that at the very least, thinking about the connectivity of the nodes in the larger graph that maybe share some of that scientific terminology would be a really promising first step.
Maybe I can build on that, what Lauren said from the NIH interest area. So like for NIH, power of interlinking those knowledge graph is kind of there is no limit to that, like what impact it can have. for example, we can like really create a whole person kind of approach to medicine. Like what kind of social economical factors might impact health, which kind of environmental effects might have an impact on in the personal health, things like that. So bringing all that rich knowledge from multiple sources and so on, it can really give us like a holistic approach to biomedicine, biomedical applications and so on. So in other words, like impact of creating like a knowledge networks is really immense. Like there's no limit to that, what we can achieve.
Thank you all. We have a question from Amit. Shamia, are you able to bring in Amit Set to the stage? If not, I'll ask Amit a question. When you talk about interconnecting knowledge graphs, are there some specifications on representation that is different than linking concepts within a knowledge graph and any use case? Maybe I'll start answering or responding to that. Okay, Amit, if we need to bring you in, you need to raise your hand if you have that option. But meantime, Dahlia, please go ahead and respond.
We do recognize that cartographic representation has a long way to go to catch up with knowledge graphs. We want to enable semantic queries using geographic representation. We want to enable data queries that are supported by graph capabilities. We want to get away from the typical portrayal layer versus the data layer. There's a lot to do there.
Any other panels like to respond to that? If not, we had an earlier talk today, or Alyssa talked about RDF and property graph and mentioned his thoughts on both approaches and even proposed a new approach that he is working on. So I don't think there is a representation that we like to start, but I'd like to hear from anyone else in the panel or in the attendee group. We're still not able to hear you, Chayden. We could see you. You may have to change your audio settings. Okay. Apologize for the technical difficulties, but a few people not able to find their raise hand option. But if you could, if you have additional questions, Amit, please post it in the chat and I can read off. Amit, hope we were able to answer your previous question. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, we could get into details about that in the office hours scheduled for the solicitation. But in the meantime, okay, I think it's up. Uh, but this is not meant to be an interaction with the program managers on this particular solicitation, but give you guys a view into what other federal agencies are thinking about open knowledge network and what their interest is in knowledge graph and open knowledge network. There is a question in the chat. I think it's directed to you, Lauren. For the NASA use case, are you exploring ontologies? Did you find something like lack of coverage, in example, open biomedical ontologies for space-specific data? Example, factors that are not examined in more general biological data sets.
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think to a certain extent, this is something that we have noticed. I know that folks in our group have been involved in developing an ontology called the Radiation Biology Ontology, RBO, to specifically discuss the radiation terminology for space, which is different from some of the radiation we tend to talk about, for example, on Earth or in cancer care settings. I know something else that comes up a lot with ontologies between space biology and general biology or biomedical terminology is simply that different terms are used for the same concept. So while the concepts may be captured by the different ontologies, the terms are slightly different, and so additional harmonization is needed. So, great question.
All your agencies are currently making data available for public. How do you guys keep track of who is using it and how much is being used for what purposes?
Well, we do user studies. However, it's usually limited just to those download. And here I'm getting into technical language that I don't fully understand. We can only keep track of those users who download directly from us. We can't keep track of secondary users where the data goes from the download. And so we know from that industry is one of our industry utilities are one of our primary customers. Although we produce excellent hydrographic data, that's actually just a smaller part of the national map user community. There are other communities, but right now that's what we're limited to. The surveys, the federal government is not allowed to conduct user surveys, but sometimes we contract another company to perform the surveys for us. But primarily all we can do is keep track of the people who directly download data from us.
Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah. So at NOAA, we have a lot of different portals and different ways to access our data currently. So some of those systems capture user statistics at a fine grain. We do a lot of surveys. What we would like to see as we move into this new paradigm is, finer grain capture, of users as they go through a central, NOAA system. We do have to be careful of PII, either directly, captured PII or derived or ephemeral captured PII. So, if we have a process chain that's doing a lot of context transformations, gathering data from a lot of different sources. We want to make sure that if we're capturing data on a user, at the first request, we're not capturing PII up front, but we're also not somehow capturing PII in aggregation based on all these things. So that's a really big concern for us right now, is this concept of legal interoperability and making sure that we're keeping users anonymous, right? But we would like to start capturing more centralized use statistics so we can do user-driven discovery and more quickly iterate on what we're providing.
Okay. Thank you. I know NIH currently has several efforts looking at building numerous knowledge graphs, especially NIH efforts related to NCAS translator program. Haluk, can you talk a little bit about if there is any effort or interest within those individual folks to interconnect those knowledge graphs, and who are the current primary customers or users of those knowledge graphs?
Sure. Yeah, that's NIH's main interest in this program, like creating fabric between those resources, as you said. In that sense, like in terms of linking those, we have several programs that are trying to do it currently. One is the Common Fund Data Ecosystem program that I'm part of. I'm one of the program leaders for that. Under that program, we have our Common Fund programs, which is like there are roughly 15 existing Common Fund programs. They've been generating data sets and the knowledge. We are trying to bring those knowledge resources that are generated by individual Common Fund programs together. There's also this NCPA activity. This is the cross-platform interoperability initiative by the NIH. Idea is to be able to do that federation of data sets and knowledge in the multi-cloud platforms. So in other words, can we like really bring those data sets and knowledge together in multi-cloud platforms and so on? So trying to find ways of doing that. And like as Jamie said, like there's a biotranslator kind of efforts as well that's reaching out to particular user communities. So again, the idea is to be able to bring those resources together, and I'm trying to find ways to connect them. There's quite a bit of investment going on in those aspects at this point. So, but we are really looking for like smart ways of doing this interlinking between the different knowledge resources and so on. And then, of course, there are this, existing programs for establishing data repositories, knowledge repositories. These are like long-standing programs run by NIH. These are mostly for establishing knowledge resources and the data resources, creating repositories kind of efforts. And then NCBI are bioinformatics office at the Nation Center for Bioinformatics, Biomedical Informatics Group. They have lots of resources that they are running. They are finding ways to interconnect those resources to each other. So they've been developing lots of tools for doing that, trying to create links between the resources, and they manage lots of resources for NIH and for the larger scientific community at large. In other words, there are lots of different activities going on, and then NIH is extremely interested in connecting those resources in an efficient and smart way. So that's why we are really interested in this initiative for that reason. So.
Okay. Thank you, Haluk. If there are representatives from other federal agencies in the audience, we would like to hear from you too. Your interest in knowledge graphs or having them part of a knowledge network, please raise your hand. We'd like to hear from you. In the meantime, I'd like to hear from the panelists on your thoughts on or vision for sustaining a knowledge graph that is built on your data set. All of you talked about various data set that you would like to utilize to build a knowledge graph to address specific issues your agency is interested in. Could you please tell the audience, how do you envision to sustain that knowledge graph going forward?
Maybe I can briefly mention from the NIH experience little about this. So we have been funding, as I said, like we have been funding knowledge graphs, knowledge bases for a long time. So it is a big struggle to sustain them. Like there are some models for like a user fee based models, and that's not functioning that well. So it's very difficult to kind of charge for use of those resources, especially if it's done for the basic science aspects. And then it also creates an environment that kind of punishes for low resource institutions. So because they don't have the additional funding that they can pay to use those resources. In that sense, like sustainability is going to continue to be a problem. That's the kind of bitter fact in some ways. So in most cases, like PIs, when they establish those resources and so on, they continue to rely on the federal agencies to continue to support those. And then maybe we can have like a natural selection kind of mechanism that we choose the best resources and then continue to fund them, maybe in an interagency way. That would be a good thing to do. So, but it's a big problem. What you say, Germany, is a big problem. And I don't think that we are going to find a solution in the near future for that. So.
Yeah, I think that from, the NIJ's standpoint, that we've also had difficulty sustaining software that we've funded. So I think what's going to have to happen is that, for instance, if there is a non-fatal firearms database built, that it would get subsumed within a program area that would then fund its continued existence. And of course, if it is really valuable, then there'll be more of a push to keep it on.
At the US campus, we have small prototype initiatives that are being funded for the application of knowledge graphs within our own organizations, being run by our own leadership. And I suspect that once if these prototypes show good results, then support will grow for the purchase of licensed software to enable more application. That's about as general. Unfortunately, that's rather general, but that's how I think it's going. There's this that if our prototypes are successful, more people will be convinced that this is worthwhile. Alternatively, we could just frustrate everybody until forced to conform. But the prototypes are very good. So, we're definitely.
Thank you. I know that is a difficult question. Basically, we are asking how would you sustain something that have not been realized yet? Difficult to answer that. Lauren, were you going to add to that?
Sure. I don't have too much to add after these great answers, but I was going to say something we've talked about internally is similarly, the ontologies that we use sometimes stop being maintained. So even just making sure that the puzzle pieces we're putting together, we're choosing from ontologies or databases that are likely to continue to be maintained. Maybe they're part of an organization that, as everyone has said, is very valuable. Seems like it's going to continue to be maintained. So.
Thank you. Can we bring in Isaiah Lynn from NIH? I believe she would like to. Okay.
Yeah. Am I?
Yes, we could hear you. Yep, okay. We could hear you.
Great. So I want to mention two things, and I'm sorry I didn't intertalking with Haluk before, because he was mentioning about a lot of resources at NIH, and I currently working at the NIAID, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. So if you notice, I was also a data scholar in the cohort in 2020. So the NIAID 2022 Data Scholar project is to build a knowledge graph for pandemic preparedness. So we are not officially announcing anything, but just this give you a hint that we really welcome any researchers to try to use NIAID data. We embrace them for knowledge graph. This is one thing I want to mention. And the second thing is I now put on my another hat for, I just speak for Oval Foundry. So Oval Foundry, when I heard people talking about ontology maintenance, so Oval Foundry is a voluntary group, but we are trying to get some funding for this group to address some issues with ontology maintenance and high quality, fair ontologies that can last longer and to be fully open sourced, to be an open source ecosystem to serve the bigger community. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a question from Claire Allen. Hopefully I'm okay. In support of the Open Knowledge Network, are you using a standard top-level ontology? If so, which one? If not, how do you plan to make everything interoperable? I'm going to try something bold and ask if Chayden, are you able to talk? If not, okay, I will try to answer that. So basically, we are not providing a solution to the team ahead of the program kickoff. We want the teams who are interested in part of this effort to propose their own solutions to that particular problem and suggest their own interest or technique to address that particular interoperability issue, whether they are interested in an RDF or a property graph scheme. They need to be flexible and being able to work with others within the team. So we don't have a solution. We're not prescribing a solution to that particular issue, but we want folks to come into the program with an open mind. Hopefully that answered your question. We still have 6 minutes left in the panel discussion. Anything else anyone would like to bring up?
Maybe we can ask the researchers what do they see as the largest gap in this field. Like maybe we can get comments on that from the research community.
Yes. Yeah. So attendees, what do you see as the biggest technical gap or even non-technical gap in interconnecting these various knowledge graph to construct a openly available knowledge network? If you have an answer or a response, please raise your hand and the facilitator will spotlight you.
Okay. Nice.
I think.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to speak when I hear the. No, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so I'm curious about basic managing knowledge resources. If that would be something that we use for this, the idea that not necessarily uh, as simple as data, but like a knowledge of would be great. And so, I mean, within my space, we've been working, trying to do metadata for computable biomedical knowledge. I mean, I don't know if it's like a broader thing you want to think about, or if we want to focus on it.
Sure. Our the Chief Information Officer of the Department of Interior, who is in charge of geoprocessor, very interested in knowledge graphs. And so there's a high probability that a federal government data, not a repository, interchange, registry, something like that. There's a very high probability something will be implemented.
And that's beyond your organization?
That one is in the primarily Department of Interior. Yeah, primarily Department of Interior.
I don't know, but that could be the
Yeah.
Could the previous speaker please identify herself? We were not able to.
They should be able to. We just can't get out at the moment through her laptop.
Okay,
Can I try that?
that's good.
Yeah, the whole.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, we can hear you, so they can hear you. Okay.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm thinking just like basic data, like the stuff to get it findable, accessible.
I thought
Like a
data.gov
download.
was being handled at Rensselaer, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I've been looking at like doing that for knowledge research.
Yeah.
So we did prototype for
Yeah.
data.gov, and then they kind of built out an enterprise off of that knowledge. So the idea is that we might do the same thing here, because I think that could work. I heard Triton in his preamble to the bidders, and my takeaway was we must have a letter that shows sustainability. And then I heard all the panelists waffling. And I get why. So I think this is the best shot from my perspective. Like it's doable, and I think we could potentially sell it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
While you're thinking of your answer, I just want to clarify. We do have a letter from the agency showing interest, and
Yeah.
that doesn't necessarily mean sustainability. People are offering sustainability because
It's hard,
number one, none of these are budget holders.
right?
And so you cannot the budget holder, you can't say, and even if you are a federal government, it's not as easy to say, oh yeah, I'm 100 million over the next 10 years. You can't just. So that's distinct.
Okay.
We still need federal agencies' commitment, and our hope before yesterday is that commitment can put us on a better path to sustainability because NSF simply ain't gonna, because we are not a sustainability agency at all. Not yet.
Do you all know Lynn by any chance? She's an assistant chief information officer for the Department of Interior. She's at the meeting today. Yes, I would love to introduce you.
Okay. Yeah, we started this biomedical space because of what I was working on, like even just like the basic metadata for knowledge is rather different
from waiting for data sets, because data sets are very straightforward. Knowledge usually has many different alternate representations, and so it just gets really complicated fast.
Exactly.
It's not like huge scale, right? Ingesting all of these sources into a common repository. Just like, where can we find this? What format is it in?
Right.
What's in BioPortal in terms of like ontologies? Not necessarily like all the classes, just like, what can I find there?
Okay, great. Well, let her know that you're looking for her and I'll try and do some, and maybe at lunchtime.
That's a conversation. They also connection. We have all the virtual.
I just wish I could get this to work better.
I should have it was working.
Well, we're at time,
Yeah, we are.
All right. Okay.
We are at time. It seems like there was a very interesting conversation going
First name is L-I-N.
going on
yes.
in the room. Dahlia and Chaidan, it seems like you guys are having a good conversation physically, but we are not able to hear you. I don't know if this is a microphone issue at Dahlia's end, but the audio is breaking in and out. We do have a question from Yun Wang. We are over our allocated time, but I'll quickly go over this question that I have not responded to. If we integrate large language models like ChatGPT with OKN, what do you think is the combination of powerful AI power and board knowledge? I think some of this was covered in the previous talk. If anyone else want to add to that, there were two talks before this panel. One talk specifically focused on leveraging large language models to actually build knowledge graphs, and another one focused on how to use or barely touched upon how to make use large language models to how to make use of a knowledge graph to address the knowledge hallucination by the large language models. Hopefully that addressed your questions. The chat. Okay. Yeah, Chaidan responded. If you wanted to hear the answer to that, you had to come to the afternoon session. So please join the afternoon session if you wanted to hear more discussions on that particular topic. But I would like to thank all the panelists for their time, very insightful comments and thoughts. So attendees, thanks for attending. If you have questions or comments, please reach out to the organizers or the panelists themselves. I'm happy to get back to you with any questions that we were unable to answer live. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
This concludes the morning session. We'll start off at 13:30 Eastern Time after 1 hour lunch break. Thank you.